Let us now make our voices heard. I pledge to serve and to push my country. I pledge to live like a citizen.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Janae Kane, and this is Civic Saturday. Woo! We've all gathered here today to participate in this new-ish civic ritual, a place where you can make new friends, connect with folks you've met here before, where you can have juicy conversations, where you can express your love and your dismay for our community and for this country, where you can come together to explore issues, take action, and just celebrate the spirit of the shared civic community. Thank you for showing up today. I'm especially gratified about welcoming you here because we have big cause to celebrate. Today we commemorate 3 years of Civic Saturdays. That's a pretty big deal. Just to let those of you who are here for the first time know, in 3 days after the 2016 election, we decided we needed to do something with our community and for our community. And so we put out the word that we were going to hold a gathering in the basement of Elliott Bay Book Company. And they've been with us ever since. Thank you, Elliott Bay. And over 250 people showed up. And ever since then, we've been doing them for every other month about here in Seattle, in venues around town. We've been invited to partner with friends and organizations to hold Civic Saturdays in other countries. I'm sorry, I told you I was nervous. In other cities around the country. And we've trained well over 50 people to create and hold their own gatherings in their own communities around the country. In fact, today our friends in Lincoln, Nebraska are having a Civic Saturday right now. If we were live streaming hooked up, we could talk to them, but we'll just send them our love. But 3 years of holding Civic Saturdays would mean nothing without you. So thank you for showing up and making this happen with your presence. Is there anyone here today who was at that very first gathering in Elliott Bay? Thank you for raising your hand, but stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Excellent. Oh, yeah. Stay standing. Stay standing. Y'all know this part. Okay. Thank you and welcome. Oh, all of these people are my friends. Or really old friends and some new friends. Stay standing, please. Stand up if you're if you're a returning member of this community. If you've been before, if you have on a blue name tag, please stand up. Many of my new friends. Thank you for showing up to celebrate with us today. So that means for those of you who are still sitting momentarily, welcome. Now that you're here, you've been here for a few minutes, few minutes. So now you are a member of the Civic Saturday community. Please stand up, and someone is going to shake your hand and welcome you. Please turn around, and if you're a returning member, meet a new member. All right, excellent. Don't sit down yet. If I can have everyone look back up here. I love to say this cheesy thing, but it's beautiful. And now when you all sit, you will now and forever be members of Civic Saturday, Seattle. Thank you. So why are we here? At Citizen University, we envision a great civic revival across our nation. Our dream is a country in which Americans are steeped in the sense of civic character, educated in the tools of civic power, and are problem-solving contributors in a self-governing community. With you, we are trying to make sense of the moral questions we face as citizens, to develop capacity to act with character in the collective. We hope that by showing up here today, you will join us in spreading the belief that a strong democracy depends on strong citizens, and that all, regardless of where you were born or our documentation status, we all have the power to make change happen in civic life, and we all have the responsibility to try. For those of you who are here for the first time, I want you to know that we imagine Civic Saturday to be like a civic analog to a faith gathering, because it's about renewing and reflecting on our faith in the idea of democracy and the creed of liberty, equality, and self-government that unites us. And because now, today, more than ever, that faith matters, and we can't take our democracy for granted. Today, we're going to celebrate with poetry, with those juicy conversations, with song, with powerful words of American civic scripture, and this new civic sermon written just for today. Now, there's one more piece that's special about today's gathering that I want to tell you about. You noticed that when you came in, there are little index cards on your seats. Normally, we have a station set up somewhere in the room for folks to fill out civic love notes that we send to our friends around the country who are also having Civic Saturdays. A few weeks ago, we held a Super Civic Saturday where there were 4 or 5 happening. How many? 5 happening on the same day all over the country, and that was pretty exciting. So we send these love notes to each other. But today we're going to ask you to send words of encouragement to yourself and to each other in this room. So take some time. We're going to collect them during civic circles at the end of today. And just take a moment to write a note to someone in this room, to yourself, that could use a little bit of encouragement. Now, I'm very happy to introduce my friend, our civic poet for Civic Saturday, Na Akua, who will come up and lead us in a moment of meditation.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, you could do better than that. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you. So before I start, I want to acknowledge this celebration. I believe this is the last portion of my term as a poet in residence for Civic Saturday. And I want to show gratitude for this opportunity and space and time and presence that I can be here with you every other month that I've been here. And the months that I haven't been, because I've been, doing some work on the other side, but still thinking about you while doing it. Thank you for all who have come to the Civic Healing Circle when we were connecting and healing, because this is what it's all about, right? It's about conversation, but that conversation to heal those aspects that we don't get a chance to do every day of our lives. Because when do we ever get to do this every day? So I hope you hold this moment. I want you to think about that. How many times do you get a chance to do this? I also want you to think about something that I was gifted. Some entity gave me this thought, and I was just like, okay, this is something that I need to share. We, as a people, have a war inside of us and outside of us. We, as a people, are the warriors. We, as a people, hold weaponry. And that weaponry does not have to be violent. That weaponry is that handshake that you just gave. That weaponry is that smile that you just gave. That weaponry is acknowledging someone on the street. That weaponry is saying, good morning. That weaponry is saying, I love you to that loved one. As we walk into a new decade, think about what is the weaponry that you want to hold? What type of warrior do you want to be? Are you balancing the war that's inside and outside of you? As you think about that, I ask you, if you are comfortable, to close your eyes and take a moment to breathe in deeply and breathe out deeply. And for my culture, we would say ashe, and so it will be done. Let there be joy when there is no assurance of tomorrow. Let there be hope because we were given today. Let there be gratitude because time waits for no one. Let there be smiles because you have come so far. Let there be a moment so I may remind you. Let there be screams to wake up the lesson. Let there be community who are willing to learn and teach. Let there be truth so the lies hold no power. Let there be music to give praise to the journey. Let there be music to acknowledge the body. Let there be music to chant ourselves free. Let there be children who choose not to repeat our flaws. Let there be tears that carry the happiness and pain. Let there be space. Let there be space. Let there be space for me. Let there be space for you. Let there be space for her. Let there be space for him. Let there be space for they. Let there be space for them. Let there be space for we. Let there be space for all to celebrate. To celebrate. Oh, let there be a great celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you so much. We are so grateful for you being here with us this year and for being our poet in residence. That was powerful and beautiful. Now, I'd like to invite you to talk to your neighbor. We're going to have a turn and talk. And take 2 minutes each to discuss this question. What is worth celebrating in our society today? So 2 minutes each. Make sure you're at 2 minutes to turn it over to your partner, and I'll get back up here in 4 minutes. Please, go right ahead. Okay. So now I would like to invite Sky, Emily, and Jerome to start making your way up here, because now we're going to have some readings of civic scripture. Members of our community are going to give these readings to provide some context and food for thought prior to the civic sermon. We encourage you to think about the thread that weaves these texts together.
This reading is from Clara Looper from the blog Stories in America, July 28th, 2005. I was always taught that segregation is wrong. I came from a family that understood the scars of segregation, and they knew it was wrong. But doing something about it was a different story, because Oklahoma was primarily at its infancy a democratic state. In writing the Constitution, the first laws that were passed were segregation laws, so my parents had lived with it. My dad was a veteran of World War I, and he believed what Woodrow Wilson said. They were fighting to make the world safe for democracy. My mother was from Texas, and she saw a black person burned in Paris, Texas, and she was afraid that would happen to anyone who spoke out against segregation. When I would say, "Why do we have to go to the back of the bus?" my mother would say, "Shut up." My dad would say, "Someday you'll be able to ride anywhere on the bus." He had a lot of faith in what would happen and what would change in Oklahoma.
Hi. This reading is by Wilma Mankiller from Every Day is a Good Day, published in 2011. My relationships with Indigenous women, particularly those who synchronize their lives with the land and the community, are markedly different from my relationships with most of my other friends. The deep binding connection among Indigenous women can be explained in part by our common life experiences, patterns of thought, and shared values, but I also believe it can be explained by a more complete, whole, interconnected understanding of the world. Among these women, there is less of a tendency to organize everything into categories and segments than there is in the larger society. While many of my other friends describe objects or events in a way that detaches them from their context, my tradition-oriented Indigenous friends tend to think about, describe, and view things in their totality. They conduct their work and live their lives within the context of the family, clan, community, nation, and universe. Context is everything.
This reading is from Will Rogers, selected quotations. Never let yesterday use up too much of today. Good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. There are three kinds of men. The one that learns by reading, the few who learn by observation, the rest of them have to pee on the electric fence for themselves. Everybody is ignorant, only on different subjects. Never miss a good chance to shut up.
Thank you, Sky and Emily and Jerome, for those readings. Thank you, Rihanna, for leading us in such wonderful, heart-filling song. And thank you, Na, for having been with us so long and continuing to set such a tone of beauty and welcome and presence. I'm so thrilled to be here with you all this morning, because today is a day to celebrate. We celebrate not only the holiday season, the season of gratitude and forgiveness, if we can muster it. We celebrate the reopening of this community treasure town hall, Seattle. Yeah. We celebrate the 3 years of Civic Saturday that we've been doing here and around the country. This is now the 21st time we've met in Seattle, and the 79th such gathering that has happened across the United States. So that's worth celebrating. We celebrate each other. We celebrate our awesome team, my teammates at Citizen University, including Tatum Fotheringill, who is usually up here a lot because she runs the Civic Saturday program, and I just want to salute Tatum. We celebrate all the folks in our orbit who are spreading this civic ritual nationwide right now. And we celebrate the ritual itself, because ritual matters in a time when we are told that up is down and good is bad and real is fake. This is real. This is up. This is good, what we're doing here. Civic Saturday is part of our mission at Citizen University to create a powerful culture of powerful, responsible citizenship in the United States. It expresses not just the joy of being here in the moment, it expresses a worldview. The idea that culture precedes structure. Structure gets all the attention these days, calls for structural change in the rules of government and economy, critiques of structural racism and sexism across many institutions. But culture is upstream of structure. It surrounds structure. It suffuses it. Culture, which is to say our values, our norms, our habits, our patterns of thought and feeling and creation, our soul, culture gives institutions their shape. The culture we together are creating, along with groups like ours at dozens of Civic Saturday gatherings in tiny rural towns and big cities, including, as you heard, this very morning in Lincoln, Nebraska, that culture is about values like mutual aid, bonds of trust and affection, bridging among not quite strangers and soon-to-be friends. Our civic culture is grounded in what Alexis de Tocqueville called habits of the heart, what Adam Smith called the moral sentiments, what Clara Luper spoke of as faith in each other. Y'all know who Clara Luper is? We heard her reading. It was the first of the texts. She was a history teacher in segregated Oklahoma City who organized her students to conduct a lunch counter sit-in at Katz Drugstore in 1958. It was the first and longest sit-in of the civil rights movement, a full year and a half before Greensboro. She was a patient, relentless, loving, hard-as-nails organizer who signed her open letters to white leaders in the city's power structure, "Your citizen, Clara Luper." She should be more celebrated, and I celebrate her today. 3 weeks ago, Tatum and I actually went to Oklahoma City to lead a Civic Saturday there, in partnership with their young mayor, David Holt, and the grassroots organizations Generation Citizen and Let's Fix It OKC. At the invitation of the mayor, we actually went to an Oklahoma City Thunder basketball game. And this could have been awkward, as some of you seem to know, considering this is the team that was formerly known as the Seattle Supersonics. But two things made me okay with being there. First, Tatum had actually made Sonics pins for us to wear in a subtle act of resistance. And second, honestly, I didn't care. The NBA bores me. I'm a baseball guy. Just don't touch the Mariners. At our Civic Saturday the next morning after that game, I pointed out, perhaps to the discomfort of those gathered, how much our two cities, Seattle and OKC, are alike. Born of a land rush and displacement of native peoples, with wild extractive cycles of boom and bust, short-sighted city planning from the get-go, racial segregation, polite avoidance of the uncomfortable. We have the Seattle freeze. They have, bless your heart, for those they don't wish to engage. Fundamentally, though, both our cities are messy, contradictory improvisations. And the improvisatory spirit of our cities, when, let's be honest, of our whole nation, of every city in this country, is both our strength and our liability. In improv sketch comedy, the cardinal rule is to never say no. However clumsy a lead-in your scene partner has just given you, no matter how flimsy a premise for the next line of dialogue, don't say no to it. You say, yes, and then you take the sketch in a new direction. In jazz, if your bandmate plays something that stirs or disturbs you, you don't cancel it. You acknowledge it. You answer it, play off it. You extend the riff your own way. Well, today I'd like to bring that spirit to the celebration of celebration, but a celebration in particular of three things: our presence, our openness, and our heritage. First, our presence here together, which is proof of something sticking. Second, the openness of our society, which we too often take for granted. And third, our heritage, which we often take to mean something fixed and solid, when it is in fact as fluid as blood. Let me note, each of these celebrations comes with a trade-off, a counterbalance, a catch, an addendum. If you've ever seen the animated Disney film Aladdin, in which Robin Williams voices the genie, you'll remember when he tells Aladdin he gets 3 wishes. "I can wish for anything?" Aladdin asks. And in a manic improvisation brought to life by animation, Robin Williams suddenly becomes William F. Buckley, the mid-century conservative pundit who spoke in a pretentious Britishy accent. There are a few provisos, a couple of quid pro quos, is what the genie says. A couple of quid pro quos, but I digress. What I was saying is that every celebration comes with a hook, a catch, a yes and, if you will. Freedom comes with quid pro quos, as people in both the United States and Ukraine have painfully been reminded. And so with that proviso, let me speak now first of presence. We've seen already who was here in this room 3 years ago at the first Civic Saturday among the 200 plus people crammed in that basement reading room at Elliott Bay. I remember the heat and the tears that morning, not only of anxiety and fear, but also of reckoning and recommitment. We had to face ourselves that morning as individual citizens, as a community, and as a nation. We had to do it face to face, the way we are here. And now we are gathered here today. Period. That alone, the gathering, is something to celebrate. We show up and we keep showing up. And the fact that Citizen University has trained 6 people since last year to lead these gatherings in their own places, and we have just sent out acceptance letters to nearly 30 more for our spring cohorts, including 2 who are in the room today, Joel and Teresa. That's something to be cheerful about. Now, by the way, the last time we held a Civic Saturday here at Town Hall, among the folks in the room singing and meeting strangers and committing to action was the great musician and artist David Byrne. He was in town for a show he was doing, and he joined us because he was curious, and he loved it. David, at the time, had been putting together a traveling PowerPoint presentation called Reasons to be Cheerful. And after we met, he included Civic Saturdays in that presentation. And his spirit of joyful civic faith and purposeful presence now fuels his exuberant theatrical concert on Broadway called American Utopia, which I'm told is what Civic Saturday could be like if we flipped the ratio of singing to speaking and added cool gray suits and a lot of dancing and David Byrne. Presence matters because it is getting too easy now to withdraw and retreat into our smallest circles of comfort. Presence in our bodies matters because when you walk around this tech-saturated town, you can count at every corner a craned neck father staring at his phone while his toddler tugs at his pant legs. Teenagers not hearing the birds overhead or the bus barreling toward them because their wireless earbuds have taken them elsewhere. Newcomers to Seattle walking past each other at lunch hour instead of making eye contact and making friends because their eyes are glued to the on-screen faces in their timeline and feed. How do you weave a citizenry out of that material? How can the body politic move when it is self-anesthetized? How can you pull a community out of the well of self-absorption? The student protesters in Hong Kong right now are no strangers to tech and apps and social media. Their movement for democracy could not be happening without these tools. But they have it right. The tools serve them, not the other way around. They know that you have to show up in numbers, in song, in costume, in force, to change anything and to do anything constructive and useful to the community. Before we get too self-congratulatory, though, for having made the choice to be here today, let us acknowledge that for most of us, it was not that hard to show up. 3 years in, Civic Saturday in Seattle, at least, still needs to invite and include more people for whom it is hard. We need to do that, not just me and my teammates at Citizen University. We all do. If you were with us in February at El Centro de la Raza for Civic Saturday, you will remember that during the community announcements at the end, one man asked in accented English whether we might sign a petition on his behalf so that he would not be deported by the government of the United States. His name is Jaime Rubio Soficio. He is undocumented, having come to the U.S. from Mexico over 12 years ago. And in those years, he worked in construction and then started a construction business. He has taught Latin dance. He's volunteered to help veterans with home repairs, woven himself into the fabric of community. He had been granted many stays of deportation, several times, until the current administration took power. Then he was given 120 days to leave this country and to leave behind his wife, Keiko Maruyama, and their young son. Janae and I saw Keiko a few weeks ago. She spoke at a potluck fundraiser at a friend's home, actually Tammy Broadhead, who's here in the room, organized by the Church Council of Greater Seattle. Jaime was not there. When his petitions were denied and he had exhausted every appeal, Jaime took sanctuary at St. Mark's Cathedral. He has lived there since April. He cannot risk leaving the building. And I promised Keiko I would share their story today, and she is with us here this morning. That potluck fundraiser was for the Church Council's programs to support families like theirs, including one that trains volunteers who accompany immigrants to appointments with government agencies. To celebrate presence is to remember our duty to champion, our duty to show up for others, our duty to accompany. That can mean literally walking alongside someone like Jaime and to embrace Keiko so that she can pass on our embrace to her husband. It can also mean spending capital in solidarity with the disfavored. David Holt, my friend who's the young mayor of Oklahoma City, is a former Republican state senator, a rising star. When the President of the United States tweeted in July that 4 liberal members of the United States Congress, all women of color, 3 of them born in the USA, should, quote, go back to their, quote, crime-infested countries, plenty of Oklahomans cheered. David responded with a tweet of his own that I want to share with you. He said, Oklahoma City is a diverse community where 60% of our children are non-white. Many of our residents are immigrants. Almost all of us are the descendants of immigrants. We are working closely with our Native community to honor those who were truly the first Americans. As an Osage, I'm a living example of the collision between the New World and the Old. I suppose I could go back to my country, but I would have to leave some of myself here. It's all messy and complicated, but made simpler when we exercise empathy, grace, and love, and we welcome all. Hashtag #OneOKC. That cost him something in his state, and I admire it. So yes, let's celebrate presence, and let's celebrate the resilience of those who take risks to be present, as well as those who show up on behalf of those who can't. If you do nothing else after we're done here today, support the Church Council with your dollars, your time, your presence. They have a little table set up over there of information. Well, let me now turn to our second celebration, the celebration of openness. For the last few months, I've been reading one of the greatest novels you probably never heard of. It's by Vasily Grossman, a writer during the Soviet Union whose work was alternately celebrated and banned by the authorities. The book is called Life and Fate, a title that audaciously but justifiably evokes Tolstoy's War and Peace. Like his literary forebear, Grossman uses war as his canvas, in this case, the Second World War, during the Battle of Stalingrad, and the way it touches the members of one extended family. He paints indelible scenes of labor camps, of walks to the gas chamber, of last stands on the banks of the Volga, of dinner table strife and lost love, of the private anguish of a scientist suddenly deemed ideologically incorrect. Woven through all these scenes like a rope that tightens around the heart and the gut is fear of the state, fear of what would later be called the Orwellian power of a totalitarian party and state to break the spirit of individuals, to deform them so that they perform and redact their speech and thoughts, even among friends, so that they learn how to rationalize evil and inaction and treat down as up, wrong as right, slavery as freedom. Though the novel's action occurs in 1942 and 1943, its characters are haunted by 1937, the peak year of Stalin's Great Purge, with its show trials and the denunciations of neighbors and colleagues and the murder of 1 million citizens. Pressed between the randomness of life on the one hand and the implacable will of the state on the other, the characters in this novel struggle to be more than just the playthings of fate. To read this novel is to awaken one's inner libertarian. And in my case, that's saying something. To read this novel as an American is to remind oneself never to take for granted the way that freedom liberates. Freedom liberates first, not by enabling consent of the governed or opening the machinery of state to all. Freedom liberates first by opening the hearts and imaginations of human beings to express without fear the full spectrum of their humanity. Freedom liberates first in the spirit and only later in the body of our laws. But to read this book today is also to be nostalgic, if that's the word, for a time when malevolent Russian leaders didn't yet know that the openness of open societies can be exploited, and that open societies can be divided at the speed of the internet, and if not conquered, at least crippled. Fake news generating divisive controversies, bot armies accelerating the polarization, conspiracy theories injected like infections into the bloodstream. They can do that to us because our civic and cultural bloodstream is permeable. We can't do it to them because theirs is not. It's an asymmetric advantage that a weak society can wield over a stronger one. Of course, it's not just that our system is open and permeable and therefore exploitable. The catalytic factor is that in our open society, there are actors like Facebook and Twitter who are willing, as a matter of profit, to aid and abet the exploiters. I used to think that the problem of social media was a kind of tragedy of the commons, in which everyone extracts benefit from the common resource, but no one thinks it's their job to maintain it. But even more, actually, it is a tragedy of the conscience, in which people who know better or should know better actively shirk the responsibility to do better. Facebook and Twitter and YouTube could today adopt a simple rule of real, verifiable identity on their platforms. Removing anonymity from those platforms would clean out a large proportion of the accounts weaponized by hostile, illiberal leaders in Moscow or Beijing or Tehran or Washington. But that would lower earnings per share. But still, let's imagine that the big social media platforms did clear out the hate-spewing disinformation bots today. Then the onus would be back on us. Whether they clean house or not, the onus will always be on us. The responsibility to do better is not Mark Zuckerberg's alone. It is ultimately ours. I am firmly of the belief that over the long term, open and inclusive societies should outperform and outlast closed, exclusive ones. But that belief assumes things we can no longer assume. That we know what to do with our freedom. That we know how to curb the excesses and sicknesses made possible by openness. That a free people could not, by disinformation and manipulation, ever be converted into mindless pawns. We need to remember that freedom is responsibility. We need to know what we believe and why, and be willing to change our minds as circumstances change. We need to sustain habits of face-to-face gathering and learning and arguing and doing. And we need to share with others what we know about how to do these things. Earlier this week, outside of Washington, D.C., I had the honor of meeting a Polish citizen named Rashard Prosecutor. During the 1980s, he was active in the nonviolent underground solidarity movement. Under a pen name, he published an illegal manual for solidarity activists called How to Survive Police Interrogation. After the communist regime fell, he helped start grassroots organizations, and he launched the Poland office of Ashoka, a global network of social and civic entrepreneurs. He's now a respected elder at the University of Warsaw and for the Ashoka ecosystem, where he's like a civic Yoda. Rashard and I had a 3-hour conversation about our lives and our histories. And what struck me most about him was his theory, born of experience, of what it takes to preserve the advantages of openness. The secret, he says, is not the strong bonds of like-minded people who think and act in small s solidarity. The secret is the so-called weak ties that web together many disparate, tightly bonded circles. A society with too many strong ties and too few of those weak ties is too easily divided and conquered. By the way, if you know anything about the history of Poland, sandwiched by fate between Prussians and Russians, you know that divide and conquer is not a mere metaphor. The strength of weak ties is what the social scientist Mark Granovetter calls it. Another way to put it might be internal permeability. What good does it do us at the societal scale to be open and permeable to the outside if on the inside, at the human scale, we seal ourselves off in little bubbles of pure identity? The point of living in a diverse, heterogeneous society is to be able to activate all that diversity and heterogeneity for the greater good. And to do that, we must make more weak ties, not only across the left and the right, but across urban and rural, Eastern and Western, churched and unchurched, young and old. That's been one of the great blessings of the body of civic seminarians that we've been training from all around the United States, that they embed and embody that breadth, and they are now passing it on. As Rashard writes in an essay about what he calls profound and peaceful social transformations, this is how the American civil rights movement worked. It's how solidarity succeeded. It's how citizens in both countries resisted the propaganda of zero-sum thinking by building trust with people outside their own circles. So yes, let's celebrate openness and prevent the exploitation of that openness by those who would divide us. And this brings me to my third and final point of celebration, and that is to celebrate our heritage. Who is us, you might say? And I'd reply, yes. That's exactly right. Who we are as Americans is this: a people ever arguing over who we are as Americans. Heritage, of course, is a loaded word these days. It's a concept more often invoked by paragons of purity and purge: white heritage, Confederate heritage, Southern heritage. But I refuse to yield the word or the idea. I insist upon claiming it for the forces of hybridity and inclusion. Perhaps some of you have heard me extol the all-American virtues of the kimchi burrito. I want to go a little farther now. I want you to see the hybrid not just in your cuisine or in your playlist, but in yourself. As Na said, the war is not only outside, but inside. I'm a conservative and a progressive, a believer and a non-believer, parochial and cosmopolitan, libertarian and communitarian. And so are you. This morning there was a reading of civic scripture from Wilma Mankiller. Do you all know who Wilma Mankiller was? She was the first woman to lead the Cherokee Nation. She came to the attention of tribal leaders in 1979 when she organized volunteers in Bell, Oklahoma, to lay 16 miles of pipe for a shared water system. 7 years later, she was elected chief of the nation. The text we heard today might sound to you like what you'd expect from a liberal Native American woman, with its emphasis on relationships and memory and the interconnectedness of things. What I noticed, though, when I first encountered those words, was that they could just as easily have been spoken by a conservative white man who was an NRA member and an avid hunter. Tradition, place, nature, quote, the context of the family, clan, community, nation. As Mankiller said, context is everything. Context means that we face our past in full. Yesterday, Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, daughter of immigrants from India, the sole person to have exited the Trump cabinet unsullied, chose not to do that. On a podcast, she said that Dylan Roof, the white supremacist who perpetrated the massacre at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, had, quote, hijacked the meaning of the Confederate battle flag, as if until the moment Roof killed those 9 African Americans in Bible study, the flag had just been an innocent symbol of, as she put it, service, sacrifice, and heritage. That was a fail. She could have shown us a better way to reckon with ourselves and our heritage and our past. In fact, she did so in 2015, after the massacre, when she took the flag down from the state capitol. And yet, I will curb my Twitter-fed reflex to demonize her absolutely. She may be cynically playing to Trump's base now that she's seen as a future presidential candidate. But she's not wrong that Confederate soldiers served and sacrificed. She just lacked the courage to spell out what they served and sacrificed for. Family, clan, community, yes, but also nation. And not this nation, a breakaway Confederate nation dedicated to the proposition that some men are created to be enslaved. A nation, if I may borrow FDR's language from this day 78 years ago, that shall live in infamy. We know moral courage when we see it. Recently, I read about the provost of Indiana University, Lauren Roble, who had to deal with a professor there who, in his personal Facebook posts, had been unabashedly racist, sexist, and homophobic. She issued a statement that I urge you to find and read in full. No mealy-mouthed administrator speak from her. She blasted this professor as a bigot, saying it was not even a close call to call him that. But then she added, quote, "We cannot, nor would we, fire Professor Rasmussen for his posts as a private citizen, as vile and stupid as they are, because the First Amendment of the United States Constitution forbids us to do so. That is not a close call," quote. And she didn't stop there with this mere philosophical statement of two opposed principles. She declared then that no student would be forced to take a course from this professor. Alternatives would be provided, and that all his grading would be double-blind, so that no student's grade could ever be distorted by his prejudices. That's what it means to reckon. That's what it means to place principle into practice. Now, racism, sexism, and homophobia are all part of our heritage as Americans, as is rapacious capitalism. But so is an exceptional creed of freedom and equality and justice for all, and an imperfect record of deeds to redeem that creed. It's both and. It's yes and. It's not either or. America is neither innocent nor wicked. You know who was good at naming our heritage in full? Will Rogers. We tend to think of the great American humorist as just that, a humorist. But he was also a prairie populist. And as much as I love his quips that we heard this morning, which truly are part of our heritage as Americans, I love even more a speech that he ad-libbed in Guyman, Oklahoma on April 14th, 1935, what came to be called Black Sunday, the darkest, most terrible day of the Dust Bowl. Here's what he said that day. "You know, we're always talking about the pioneers and what great folks the old pioneers were. Well, I think if we just stop and look history in the face, the pioneer wasn't anything in the world but a guy that wanted something for nothing. That's about all they were. He was a guy that wanted to live off everything nature had done. He wanted to cut a tree down that never did cost him anything, but he never did plant one. We're just now learning that we can rob from nature the same as we can rob from an individual. All the pioneer had was an axe and a plow and a gun, and he went out and lived off nature. At least he thought it was nature he was living off of, but really, it was future generations he was living off of. That's Will Rogers. And our true heritage is not the pioneer myth that assumed the non-existence and non-humanity of the native peoples, and that valorized resource-depleting selfishness. Our true and complete heritage is a mixture of rugged individualism, yes, and dogged collective effort. Our true heritage is a hybrid of the homespun Will Rogers, who makes you chuckle at human foibles, and the firebrand Will Rogers, who makes you boil at American hypocrisy. So yes, let's celebrate our heritage, and let's recommit ourselves to our country's creed and tell the full, hybridized, morally complex story of that heritage. If old American history was triumphalist and new American history accentuates the undertold underside, then let us live and write the synthesis that contains both. Let us insist that our history cannot be celebrated in halves, either the good alone or the bad alone, that it can be celebrated only in full, the good, the bad, and the ugly, each shaping the others, now and forever. In all these yes-and combinations of celebration, there is an implied concept that you can take from accounting. We aren't as good as our strengths or as weak as our weaknesses. We are the net of our assets minus our liabilities. If the balance of that equation is positive, then we're doing all right. If not, then not so much. This is true of individuals, like our presidents. It is true of you and me. It is true of cities like OKC and Seattle. It is true of a society like Poland or Russia or Canada or China or the United States. Bill Clinton once said, "There's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with America." True in theory. But whether the fixing will in fact occur, whether that potential for a net positive outcome is ever achieved, depends on what you and I choose to do. The variable that determines whether we are net positive or net negative as a society is responsibility. The responsibility or irresponsibility of a single leader can't make or break a society. Barack Obama and Donald Trump are proof of that. It's whether we who are the people are a responsible people in our countless everyday choices. Here in the non-Soviet, non-Confederate United States of America, we have some great rights to assemble peaceably and joyfully, even if sometimes angrily and anxiously, to express ourselves openly without fear of reprisal, whether by the state or by self-appointed enforcers of cultural orthodoxy, to combine our stories and our souls and our bloodlines into a grand synthesis of civic heritage. And here, in the non-Soviet, non-Confederate United States of America, we have some great responsibilities to welcome new people into the spaces where we gather, to create new connections between those who live like we do and those who don't, to tell a new story of us and who us is, and to ask people to reflect on who and what has shaped their own sense of Americanness. And to do all this with an open heart, a curious mind, the humility to know that each of us is ignorant in different ways, and a faith in each other and in our ability to improvise a way forward. How lucky are we that we get to save our country now? Let's celebrate that together. Thank you.
We're going to now move into civic circles, which is my favorite time because it's a time for us to really be together and to reflect upon the thoughts and ideas and feelings that we've had today. And so as you're writing, I'm going to tell you that there are a few ground rules of civic circles. Because we're going to form into circles of 4 to 6 people and then discuss a question, a prompt, I want to make sure that for those of you who don't really usually show up and talk in a circle of strangers, to just try to do that a little bit more. For those of you who love to talk and often dominate a conversation, don't do that today. Sit back and listen. Everyone should speak once before anyone speaks twice. And I believe those are our rules. We really want you to listen to hear and not to respond. Our question today that we want you to consider together is, who will you welcome, accompany, or meet across a divide in 2020?
I should be looking for those places of commonality and, building on them a little bit rather than always assuming that we're just so divided in how we think.
Just finding myself being willing to be open and listen to their point of view is a change for me.
You know, maybe like reach out to people instead of just fear them.
I think I should not assume that I can't understand, but maybe at least to say, okay, I hear you.
And if you don't do that, then you can never really address some of these core problems that face this city and this country.
And maybe if we can build from there, we might discover that actually we have a lot in common and care about a lot of the same things.
My name is Tatum Fotheringill. I'm the program manager for Civic Saturday, and I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you all celebrating 3 years today of Civic Saturday. So extra thrilled. When I was thinking about putting together today's program, I was thinking so much about how, we sort of like do this and that's fine, but it's really about you all who have showed up for this long, who've really kept this community going. And so I'd love to hear from anyone in the audience who, feels compelled, just sort of raise your hand up, and it can be as simple as, I love having a place where I can, beat the Seattle freeze and come talk to someone and not feel weird. Or I love having a place to come and sing publicly, as poorly as I do, or, whatever it is. So I'm going to pass it to you all. If you've been here a lot or if you've been here a little, anything is welcome to share. So just sort of indicate to me and I'll call on you. Yeah.
This is my soul fuel, and I'm so grateful for the work that continues, and it has reminded me to keep showing up. For me, it's given me the courage to try to do more.
For everybody who's trying to show up more, whether it's in your family and friends or out in the world, you need to get filled up, in order to have that energy to give to other people. And this is a place for me that I get filled up.
My dad, everybody.
It's fun to see everybody here. It gives me courage, and it reminds me that we can do a lot better. So, thanks.
Democracy is the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say it's happiness, right? So it means everybody's got to kind of get off. Me, I've got to get off my ass and work and talk to more people and listen more. Actually, for me, listen more.
It's such a great reason to get up in the morning on a Saturday to connect with people. And I just so appreciate kind of grounding myself in community with new people and old friends as well. And just kind of grounding in humanity in this space, in real life, real conversations versus online.
One of the words for leadership, it's called Isumata. And what it is, it's the person in the community that draws the collective wisdom of the community out. And so this space and all of us and all of you help do that. And that's what excites me about this work, is that there's collective wisdom in this community.
I want to give a quick thank you to, first of all, Town Hall for being in this beautiful space and welcoming us and being a partner with us in this work, to Elliott Bay Books, to Seattle Channel, organizations that we love and support each other, and also to the Evergrey, who you may not see, but is a great organization in the city and a media partner for Civic Saturday. If you're looking for something to do, the Evergrey will tell you where you should go and what you should do. Any donation you may be inclined to make, we're going to say, forget about it. Your donation is an assignment. Bring a friend. So if you have that inclination, spread the work, bring a friend. That's what we're asking of you today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back up here my friend Na.
Community. We gather like sunrise, form circles like recess. We stand receptive, allowing our ears and heart to dialogue. Showing pearly whites like clouds, hoping it leaves comfort. Come forth and know that you matter here. Good day.